And a good morning, Birds fan. Appreciate you jumping in bright and early with us here on Birds 365, our last summer Monday of the year. Because as of next Monday, it'll be a football Monday because the Eagles will actually be gathering down in South Philadelphia. We're here to talk about the Birds for the next 2 hours. Your Mac and Mac guys, John McMullen and Jody McDonald. And Johnny Mac, it is almost here, the start of the 2023 season. And we know that because you have an Eagle schedule. You know what your working schedule will look like for at least the next couple of weeks. And, man, you're going to be working hard, and the Eagles are going to be working hard. It's going to be a nice, relaxed summer. Hey, they did it the way they did it last year. And
hey, don't say that. We're still working hard, but yeah,
no,
it's not as hard as it used to be.
That's what I meant by it. Thank you very much for clarifying that for me. It's all relatively working hard, but if you compare it to what you used to do, I used to do, and most importantly, what the Eagles used to do, this is a scaled back prep for the 2023 season, Johnny Mac.
Yeah, I mean, the Eagles have leaned into it. It's hard to criticize them. I'd like to, but it worked. So, I mean, that's what they're leaning on, and I would argue, leaning even further into it with their practice sessions. The training camp, the traditional training camp portion, is going to be very light compared to what it once was in a different era for obvious reasons. I mean, it's lighter everywhere, but the Eagles have taken it to another level. And look, I mean, they're the best team in the NFC. They were, they did the same thing last year. They were healthier than most teams, to say the least. And this is where I agree with the Eagles. I've said this before, Jody, is, if you could, I'd like to see if it were under the old rules, what they would do. But obviously you can never see that. In other words, if you could have 2-a-days, I think there would be certain coaches taking advantage of that. It would be interesting to see what the Eagles did in that type of circumstance. Now, you can't do that. So it's become this, as I say, this cost-benefit analysis for teams. Well, you can't prepare like you used to anyway. So, you weigh that against being as healthy as possible for week one. There's no reason other than a freak accident that you should lose a starter in the preseason. There's no reason. And that's what the Eagles believe. I kind of agree with them on that. And then you sort of have these growing pains early in the season. And I think the Eagles will. And I think they did last year. And I think most teams do. Everybody says those first two games are like extended preseason games. You're kind of feeling your way. And you remember week one in Detroit, the Eagles got out to the big lead and they kind of fell apart and were able to hold on. A lot of sloppiness, didn't get the ball to Devontae Smith. There were a lot of penalties, a lot of that. You hope you can overcome it. And the Eagles have enough talent to where they can out-talent teams, make some mistakes, and still win games. So, they want to stay healthy more than anything else in the summer.
It truly is a balancing act, and the Eagles did it almost to perfection last year. You talked about the struggles early in the season. How many games did they play before they lost one?
Yeah, exactly.
They were undefeated till 8-0. So despite being a little sloppy here, there, and everywhere, all they did was win football games. So you can't argue against that. And your point about, hey, Jody, please don't revisit 2-a-days. It just doesn't exist anymore. No teams do it in the National Football League. That's true. They've collectively bargained out a lot of the work that you can do or used to be able to do in the National Football League. That being said, the Eagles might do less than anyone else in the NFL. That they are the king of less is more, and sure enough, it worked for them damn close to perfection, at least early in the season. So not a great surprise that the schedule comes out and the practices are light. The practices are going to be walkthroughs. You told me that what's labeled as a closed practice means, of course, you can't get in there and none of the media can, but it's just a walkthrough, that they've got a bunch of walkthroughs in the first week of first 10 days of practice. They got 3 walkthroughs already.
Day two, they have a walkthrough. No media availability. So we'll be there Wednesday. We won't be there Thursday. We'll be back Friday. We won't be there back Saturday. We'll be back Sunday. They're having a walkthrough on Monday. Tuesday is an open practice for us. Wednesday, the players, August 2nd, day off. Thursday, practice. Friday, first back-to-back practices.
Wow. They're going to actually practice back-to-back days?
August 3rd and August 4th. Then they have a walkthrough on the 5th. Then they have the Lincoln Financial Field practice. After the link practice, which is the only open practice to the fans, obviously certain fans are in the NovaCare complex, but that's season ticket holders, marketing partners, things like that. Then they have, players' day off and a walkthrough. So they got 2 days where we won't be there. And then they have back-to-back practices again, Wednesday, Thursday, August 9th, August 10th. And that's essentially it for the training camp portion. But you do have the 2 joint practices after that, with Indianapolis and Cleveland. I forget which one's first. I forget the schedule. But so you do have more, and we'll have more time to look at this particular team. But yeah, it's never been less. And they like that, obviously. I don't want to overstate it. I would say, but they enjoy not having eyes on them. So,
right.
Well, the vast majority, 90%, is about player health. And I don't even say player safety, player health. About 90%, 10% is, hey, we don't have to let people in. Let's do it this way.
And to the Eagles' credit, well, I'm assuming credit. You would know better than I, and the players may or may not give you information. It isn't like practice starts, Sirianni blows the whistle, they go 55 minutes, he blows the whistle again, they all go in and shower and get the hell out of Dodge. No, they do spend a lot of time in meetings, classroom stuff, breaking down video, while the time on the field spent actually playing football, working out, doing football activities, and allowing the Eagle fans, through media members like yourself, to know what the hell's going on. That is been severely cut down from certainly what it once was, and even the last couple of years. Doesn't mean the Eagles aren't prepping for the season. They're just doing so indoors, not under the watchful eye of guys like John McMullen, correct?
Yeah, I mean, it's still full days for the players. I mean, they get there early in the morning and they leave, after dinner time. So it's completely full days for the players. A lot of walkthroughs, a lot of meetings, as you mentioned. Obviously, you have, strength and conditioning and all that kind of stuff mixed in. So they're doing a lot of work that we don't get to see. And, that's why sometimes, the Eagles kind of snuck up on us, going from a 9-8 team, squeaking into the playoffs, looking very poor against Tampa in the playoffs. And then all of a sudden, they're the best team in football for the majority of the season. So I don't want to understate. They're doing a lot of work. And that's why they feel emboldened to do it this way as well, because it worked for them.
A lot of work last year paid off in an NFC championship and almost an overall NFL championship. But there are changes, and we've certainly talked plenty about the free agents that left and what Howie Roseman did as best he could to replace him. There's also significant changes on the coaching staff, John, and that's really important at this time of year. I'm not trying to downplay the game day calls, which are uber important, but in the walk-up to a season, in the preparation of the season, in the many hours spent inside the building, getting ready for the season, does this team have a good enough staff? I'm not saying they had to keep Shane Steichen. There's rumor that they were willing to pay Jonathan Gannon a whole boatload of money just to stay and be the defensive coordinator. He took the Arizona job. They've replaced those coaches as well, and even expanded the coaching staff. Put in an extra cornerback coach for this team. How is this team going to be coached this year? Is this coaching staff good enough, or will we not know until we actually see them perform on?
Yeah, we definitely won't know defensively till after we see him, especially offensively. I don't think is as big as a problem because it's Nick Sirianni's offense, and he's made it very clear. As much respect in the moment I had for Shane Steichen's play calling, that we have to see. Because some of it is, no matter how much work you do during the week, some of it is Shane's feel for what play to call at what time. And he was very good at what I would say the callback, is set somebody up and then come back to it late in the game at a key moment, maybe do something opposite and cash in really big. I thought he was really, really good at that, had a natural feel for it. But the offense as a whole, that's Nick. That's Nick. I mean, every play on the sheet is Nick, and everybody contributing. Kevin Patullo, I talk about all the time, is a bigger part of this coaching staff than people realize. He's been Nick Sirianni's right-hand man since day one. He's closest to him of anybody on the coaching staff, including the prior coaching staff. So he's a big deal. And he's still here, sort of as consigliere, I like to call him. And Brian Johnson was here. He was already here. So I don't have as much concern about the offense. The defense, it's kind of the opposite with the fan base, but to be perfectly honest, I think that's emotional, and they're, not thinking clearly. They lost, again, not only a coordinator who's good enough to get a head coaching job and good enough to get interviews before he got the head coaching job. So it's not just the Eagles who like Jonathan Gannon. The number 2 defense, the number 1 passing defense, the 4th team in NFL history. Let me repeat that. The 4th team in NFL history to get 70 sacks. Hassan Reddick career year, Josh Sweat career year, James Bradbury career year, TJ Edwards career year, Kaiser White career year, Marcus Epps career year, CJ Gardner-Johnson career year. Did I miss anybody?
I would
all
say
had their best years.
Damn close. Brandon Graham. You could make an argument.
I would disagree with that. It was the sacks with Brandon. Brandon used to play 70-80% of the snaps. I mean, and he was one of the best two-way edge defenders in football. So I wouldn't go that far. He played 30% of the snaps, 35% of the snaps. So I just think his role changed. He embraced his role. So instead of being a starting pitcher, he was a closer, and he shifted, and he played very well. But to me, the starting pitcher is more important. So back in the old days, I should say, back when baseball ran the way baseball should be run, the starting pitcher was more important.
Yeah, but times change, game change, baseball change, football changes. So
that's the analogy, though. That's the analogy.
Okay.
But either way, all these players having career years. So I think a lot of the criticism there is emotional. But even if you take that away and say, oh, Gannon really does stink. Gannon got lucky. It was all the personnel who happen to have, again, career years.
Yeah.
At the same time. They also lost Denard Wilson, who, as I said, if you were doing a coaching depth chart, he would have been number 2 on the defensive side. He was Gannon's right-hand man, self-described by Jonathan, and Nick Rollis, who was the number 3. They lost both of them. So not only are you replacing the coordinator, you're replacing the 2 top coaches under the coordinator.
But let me ask you a question on that. Nick Rallis, number 3, as per John McMullen or as per Jonathan Gannon?
As per Jonathan Gannon and the Eagles. I mean, remember, the Eagles interviewed Nick Rallis to be the defensive coordinator, their defensive coordinator, once Gannon left, before he left to go with Gannon to Arizona. So he was in the mix to be defensive coordinator. A little bit too young. He was when the Eagles hired him, he was the youngest position coach in the NFL.
Right.
I don't even think he's 30 yet. He just turned 30. I just looking up. He turned 30 on July 13th. A little bit young, I think, and they felt, I think the Eagles felt, but they really liked him as a coach. So anyway, they lost their 3 top coaches. And I get the sense, when they made the decision to go outside the organization, and this is, again, the fan base is assuming the defense is going to be different. It ain't going to be different. One of the reasons he went outside the organization is because I think Denard wanted to change things a little bit too much. And Nick, let me say it again, Nick wants the Fangio-like scheme. Nick Sirianni wants it. That's what he wants run on the defensive side of the football. Now I can talk about it. We had sort of a wide-ranging interview with Nick earlier over the summer before camp to talk about sort of big picture issues. We talked a lot about the coaching staff, a lot about the changes, a lot about Sean Desai, a lot about the defense and the philosophy. And he made it very clear, he wants certain things done on the defensive side of the football. Limit explosive plays is number 1. That's why they play the way they do. Through all his studies, Nick says consistently, there's 2 things. If you win the explosive play battle and you win the turnover battle, which is obvious, if you win those 2 categories, lightning's got to strike for you to lose a football game. And he's right. Now, it can be frustrating at times. I say it all the time, and Jody knows this. I don't like the scheme. I don't like the scheme because too many teams run it. I think quarterbacks are getting used to it, especially the top-tier quarterbacks. I think, which they really did struggle when Big kind of unfurled it a number of years ago. I think too many teams use it. We've seen it in the past, whether it's Tony Dungy's Tampa 2 or which I was on the ground floor of. It was really Tony Dungy's Minnesota 2, but that's not as catchy, and they didn't win the Super Bowl. People caught up to it. Pete Carroll's cover 3, people caught up to it. I think people have caught up to this, but we'll see how it shakes out. Sean's here because he is a direct disciple of Vic Fangio. That's why he's here. And that's why Denard Wilson isn't here.
Understand everything you're saying except for one thing. Nick Rallis is their number 3 coach. You just ran down some of the seasons that everybody had last year, and a lot of it had to do with the defensive line and the ability to pressure the quarterback and the like. I think Tracy Rocker and Jeremiah Washburn would raise their hands and go, wait a minute, linebackers who you let the 2 starters who had career years walk out the door. You're suggesting their coach was a better coach than the job that we did with the defensive line? I find that tough to comprehend. If the Philadelphia Eagles, who put so little an emphasis on linebacker, would so emphasize the abilities of their linebacker coach, then why don't you get some linebackers? And why don't you upgrade a little bit of linebacker? If linebackers that important, if the coach is the 3rd best coach on your staff, why wouldn't you invest a little bit on actual players at that position?
Well, they can. That's different from coaching and what someone's coaching acumen or coaching ability. Remember, they have everybody in the building. They can interview whoever they want. They interviewed 2 people in the building to be defensive coordinator. They didn't interview Jeremiah Washburn. They didn't interview Tracy Rocker. They interviewed Nick Rallis. And obviously they interviewed Denard Wilson. They could have interviewed those guys. They didn't, because they think, and again, it's a bigger picture. They think Nick has a higher upside as far as coordinating an entire defense, and ultimately, everybody's personal ambition, or most, shouldn't say everybody, because Jim Johnson existed, Jeff Stoutland exists.
Right, but they thought so much of Nick Rallis that he's got a chance to be defensive coordinator. Why isn't the defensive coordinator of the Eagles right now?
He was 29 years old. I said they think he needs a little more experience. He is a defensive coordinator. He'd be here, but he left.
What coaching position does he hold for the Arizona Cardinals?
Defensive coordinator.
Oh, okay. So the Cardinals thought he was old enough to come to DC, but the Eagles didn't. So how much did the Eagles really think that they were going to make?
Well, everybody's different. I mean, Jonathan's there. Jonathan loves him. I mean, everybody's different. There's not too many guys who are going to hire a 27-year-old to be a position coach. The Eagles did. There's not too many teams that are going to hire a 30-year-old to be a defensive coordinator. The Cardinals did. There's not too many teams that would hire a 29-year-old to be a special teams coordinator. The Eagles did. I had a lot of questions about what the Eagles did on their original coaching staff. Hey, it was a good coaching staff in hindsight. And now, and Philadelphia's been through this before, Jody, with Andy Reid and Doug Peterson, most notably. When you lose good coaches, I was compared to the Xerox machine. The copy usually isn't as clear, not quite as good. And all you get, the generation after generation, a little bit worse, that copy becomes. Typically, that's what happens. That's the concern.
And there should be. And the reason it will be paying close attention to Eagles here in the preseason is we got to see how much the quality of that copy did come down. It may come out perfectly. It may actually be an upgrade if you got a really nice, really quality copier. But they got to be able to show us with what they do while coaching and when the season actually starts. All right. We're making Jeff Kerr wait. Look up at me, Jeff Kerr. He's got the headsets on there. He's smiling. All right. He's ready to go. Our pal from CBSSports.com, Jeff Kerr. First guest next here on Birds 365.